Naam, I'm here with Japjeet Kaur, and my name is Guruamrit Kaur, and I am with Sikh Dharma International. And we're delighted to speak with Japjeet Kaur today about the stages of life, of childhood, and the teenage years. And so we're going to go ahead and get started with the interview. So the first question is, when we look at life's stages from birth to death, what is the significance of the period of adolescence in our lives? And why is this phase of life important?
All right, great, we're getting right into it. Well, every stage of life is important and it has its own benefits and development. So when we're looking at adolescence, we are looking at, let's say, the ages of 11 till 18. So there's a few different cycles that happen during that time. There's the cycle of intelligence changes at the age of 11. The cycle of consciousness changes every 7 years. So that would be 14, it switches during this period. And then the cycle of the body at 18 years. So those are different stages of development that Siri Singh Sahib Liki Bhajan set out. And when you look at kids and when you watch them and you watch teenagers, you can really see those changes take place. So for instance, at the age of around 13, 14, you really see teenagers start to exert themselves in new ways and start to really figure out who they are and what they stand for and making stands in that regard. In my life, I became a vegetarian at the age of 14, and that came from within myself. It was an impulse that I had within me that I felt really strongly about and started to exert my power in that way. So I work at Miri Piri Academy, the school that the Siri Singh Sahib founded in India, and we can see that a lot there, that around that age, the kids start really owning who they are and start to make steps to assert themselves in that way.
Oh, beautiful, thank you. It's really nice to hear a bit of your personal experience and also the yogic perspective. And so our next question is, do you have any tools that can help teens make big life decisions?
Okay. So this question, big life decisions, seems to hold within it. I'm thinking when you're asking this question, you're thinking about things like what college to go to, what career to take. Is that what you're kind of thinking of when you're talking about big decisions?
Yeah, I think that's a good place to go. Those are probably some of the biggest decisions that teenagers kind of have to make in this day and age. So
yeah, I think the thing about making big decisions is that first you need to have practice making what we would call small decisions. But inherent in the way I'm saying this is a kind of a judgment. So for teenagers, but really this will hold for anybody, every decision is important. What you eat, what you wear, whether you go to that person's birthday party, how you respond to somebody in a stressful situation, what you decide to write your paper on, these are all hold a lot of weight and a lot of importance. So I think the way to prepare teenagers to make what we would consider bigger decisions is to first let them make what we would consider smaller decisions. So you really need to empower teenagers, but at every stage in life, children, give them the ability to make decisions for themselves and see the consequences of those decisions. So if you don't give them that opportunity when they're younger and as they're developing, they're not going to suddenly be able to make big decisions when they're 18 years old. So really the thing to do here is to, all along the stage of their development, as is appropriate for their development, let them make decisions and let them see the consequences of those decisions. You can help them out and guide them in this process. So if they have a decision to make, you can outline to them, if you choose option A, this is the likely consequence of that. If you choose option B, this is the likely consequence of that, and then let them make the decision from there. So Mr. Singh's I've talked a lot about being very direct with kids and treating them like they're intelligent human beings, which they are, and teaching them values by showing them and outlining to them the consequences of their actions ahead of time so that they can make the best informed decision that they can in the moment. And this takes practice. You're not gonna, if you take that ability away from kids and away from teenagers, they're not suddenly gonna develop it one day when it's really important. It has to be developed on a daily basis in terms of what they're eating, in terms of what they're watching, in terms of how they're interacting with others. They need to have that autonomy to make those decisions for themselves so that they can develop the habit of it so that they can develop a relationship with themselves and learn from their decisions, and so that as they go along, they can make better and better decisions.
Thank you. Nice. That's what a wise, I mean, that seems like a very wise approach. And I think that's both very wise and very practical.
I'll say something else when it comes to decisions about things like what college to go to. I think in a lot of respects, parents or adults in teenagers' lives can put a lot of pressure on them in this regard. So as much as possible, if you could take away the extra pressure of making these decisions, and that would help. If you know from yourself that if you're under a lot of stress and pressure, you're not going to make the right decision, or you're not going to make the best decision that you can. So the way that adults can also help is to provide a space, to provide a container, to provide the opportunity to explore the options and give feedback and reflection to the children or teenagers that they're guiding, but not to add extra pressure and expectations to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's really important. And so our next question is, do you find any teachings or tools from Sikh Dharma or Kundalini Yoga to be particularly helpful for children or teenagers? And can you recommend any practices that can be, really useful for these age groups?
Basically, everything that we do in the Sikh Dharma lifestyle is beneficial to children and to teenagers. That's why the gurus have outlined the path in the way that they have, is because they've recognized and identified all the things that a human being needs to be healthy, happy, and holy. So anything that you choose, any practice, any lifestyle that you're drawing from Sikh Dharma is going to be beneficial to children and to teenagers. The important thing is that parents or adults in children's lives are practicing these things themselves. So if you create an environment for your children where you are practicing any of the things in Sikh Dharma, you're meditating, you're doing Kundalini Yoga, you're reading from the Guru, you're being a vegetarian, you're living a graceful lifestyle, that's how the children are going to learn mostly, is from your role modeling. And they're going to pick up your values, whether you say them out loud or you don't. So children always pick up their parents' values. They recognize them perfectly, and they will live them in their lives. So the best thing you can do as a parent is really, what's important to you, figure that out and live that yourself. Create an environment where it is available for your children, and they'll learn from that. So you don't have to force things down teenagers' throats or force things down children's throats. You just be a role model yourself, and they'll pick up your values from the way that you live your life.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Yes, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Let me just see if I have anything else to say about that. Just one second.
Yeah, please.
So being a role model yourself is one of the best approaches that you can take with your children. We are, flawed human beings. We're not perfect. And so we might not be living up to the expectations that we have of ourselves or that we'd like for our children. And that's a reality sometimes. So for instance, if you smoke and you don't want your children to smoke, you can talk to them about that. And you can, again, be direct with them in that and acknowledge that, look, I'm smoking, and I know that it's not healthy for me. And for whatever reason, I can't stop doing it. So, but I don't want that for you. I would like something better for you. And so I'm asking you not to smoke because it's not in your best interest, and I really care about you, and I don't want you to follow in these footsteps. So that's a kind of one example, but also teenagers really do understand, and they appreciate being talked to directly. So even if there's a gap in your practice and there's a gap in how you're living your life, you can still communicate that to your child and explain that you want something better for them than what you're doing yourself. Because I think parents and all people can get kind of hung up on, in the guilt and shame if they're not doing something the way that they want to. that's just being a human, and we're all growing and developing. And so you can acknowledge that, and your children will appreciate when you're honest and direct with them.
Absolutely. Thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense. And so our next question.
Do you want me to get more into, like, maybe let me see if I can say something more specifically about the practices that that we have. So I work at Miri Piri Academy, and we do a lot of different practices, and we live a dharmic lifestyle there. And the kids are exposed to many different aspects and facets of the path. When it comes to teaching Kundalini Yoga, we often do have shorter classes at around 45 minutes or an hour. We tend to do a lot of very invigorating exercises so that we can really engage their whole mind, body, and spirit in the process. We do longer meditations and things like that too, on occasion or at times, but on a daily basis, we really focus on invigorating sets so that they can really engage their whole mind, body, and spirit. At this age, they're still sometimes might have a little bit of trouble concentrating. So we want to make it as engaging as possible, and so that they can't kind of space out and zone out. When it comes to little kids, celestial communication is just a miracle worker. I taught kids yoga, kindergarten to grade 9, and in every class at a school. And in every class, there would be a few people that just couldn't get into the yoga, just couldn't connect, were looking this way, looking that way, completely distracted. I'd get to celestial communication, and those kids that were previously distracted were the most engaged. So I'm not entirely sure why celestial communication works, but it really is a miracle worker in my mind for teaching kids that are very distracted how to concentrate. And I would have thought that they would be, even as we got older into grade 7, 8, 9, where I thought they might have some attitude towards it, they really didn't. They somehow, it really spoke to them. If you don't know celestial communications, when you do a meditation, then you do like some arm movements along with it. And that, I think it just mirrors them. And that's a really important thing that we need to do for kids and teenagers, is that we need to mirror back to them who they are. And perhaps this practice really helps with that. So I would say if you're teaching a younger person to meditate and they're having difficulties with that, or you're just beginning with them, and especially if they're quite young, that celestial communication is a really good meditation to start with. And you can also let the kids themselves make up the movements. So sometimes people in our community have made up movements with celestial communications, but it's really fun for the kids to make up their own, and they can use their creativity and be involved in that way. So, and Sanatana Kaur and others have like great tracks that are partly in English, partly in Gurmukhi, and that's a good place to start.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. I remember doing celestial communications when I was a child, and I have some fond memories of that. And yeah, so thank you for kind of bringing that in, and also bringing in all the, the ways that MPA kind of brings in all of those wonderful practices and that technology.
Yeah, and for the teenagers, especially at MPA, part of the lifestyle that we teach is physical activity. So there's yoga, but there's also martial arts, kabaddi, physical training, sports. And it's really important at that age in their development. When they're a teenager, they have so much energy and they have to work it out. So if you think they can just sit down and concentrate in front of a computer and doing their Zoom classes all day without kind of working out their body and working the energy through their being, it's just not going to work out effectively. So we find that especially boys, but especially just all boys really, they really need a lot of strong physical activity to settle their bodies so that they can concentrate or develop in other ways. So for teenagers, it's really important that they exercise and consider that part of the dharmic lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I can imagine that to be the case.
But really, you can't ignore any part of it. So really, when it, if parents are having challenges with their children or their teenagers, the first thing to do is really check to make sure that their basic needs are being taken care of, and their root chakra, second chakra, third chakra are all getting what they need. And it's not rocket science, but sometimes it's not present. So are they sleeping enough? Are they eating at regular meal times? Are they eating healthy food? Are they getting enough exercise? Are they in an environment that is safe and engaging? And you know, safety is one thing, it's really important, but also engaging. Like they need interaction, they need excitement, they need fun, they need challenge. And so these are the kind of aspects of the MPA program that we put together to really serve all the different parts of teenagers being. And it's the first thing we do when someone's having a challenge at the school is we first, like, you know, come in, sit down, have you eaten? And if you haven't eaten, then let's deal with that first. And that's often will solve the problem. Have you had any water? Did you sleep okay last night? Like, making sure those basic needs are taken care of is super important. And it's also what the Seek Path teaches. It's like the first thing you do when you go to, you know, Gurdwara is like first eat, like let's make sure that everybody's basic needs are being taken care of. And then we can go on to loftier ideals. But really you have to start with making sure all those root chakra, second chakra, third chakra issues are being taken care of so that, so then they can develop in other ways. And it seems really basic and almost not worth mentioning, but it's amazing how many kids and teenagers don't have those, that's not being provided for them in their environment for whatever reason. And that's really the first place that you need to start before you get into wanting your child to meditate. And really teaching kids to meditate starts much younger. Siri Singh said you can teach them, the mother can teach them to meditate in the womb. So this is, you know, training children and developing children is a lifelong process that starts right from conception or before, when the parents are preparing to have the child.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I really appreciated that kind of holistic kind of perspective, and it brought a lot in, and it's really nice to hear that kind of nurturing aspect of things as well. It's very kind of nice to hear that. And so, is there anything else on this kind of area of kind of meditative or spiritual practice and these age groups that you wanted to touch on before we go on to the next kind of theme? Or
I think that's probably good. Again, I think these things start with the parents and with the adults in their life. If they see their parents, if they have a meditative practice, they're much more likely to develop one themselves. We are a product of our environment, and we're a product of the people that we hang out with. And so that's as a parent or as a caring adult in a child's life or in a teenager's life, the best thing that you can do is create an environment that provides the opportunity to develop dharmically.
yes, absolutely. Thank you. I agree. So going on to kind of our next theme of the interview, I think not all teens, but I think a lot of teens, and sort of a common theme of those years is that there's kind of oftentimes some kind of a struggle with self-esteem issues. So wanted to ask if you have any tips for how teens can maintain values that are important to them when peer pressure may be pushing them in another direction, and kind of building a base of self-esteem so that they can kind of be strong in themselves in the face of those kinds of situations.
Yeah, again, self-esteem starts much earlier than it being a teenager. So you really need to work on developing a child's self-esteem from the very beginning. The main way they get self-esteem is from having secure adults in their life. So again, when you're talking about teenagers, when you're talking about children, the first thing you need to do is look at yourself and work on yourself to create that stability, that connection to God and Guru within yourself, so that you can be a stable support to the children and teenagers in your life. When it comes to raising children, you need to give them healthy challenge at all stages of their development. So here's an example from a different path, but in Japan, it's very well established within the culture that they give the children opportunities to develop confidence in themselves. So when they're 5 years old, they'll send them to the store for the first time by themselves, and they'll say, pick up this one item, use the money, and then come right back. And they give them a task that they know that they can do, that they can be successful at, and that they can feel a sense of accomplishment in themselves. And then from there, they build on it, so that by the time they're 7, they're taking 2 trains to school on their own. So you need to actively consider building independence and confidence in your children by giving them opportunities and tasks that they can be successful at that are progressively more difficult. So this starts off with the understanding that you're trying to create an independent human being and not one that is dependent on you. I think if we look at our society, I'm going to talk about Canadian, US society, over the last 50 years, we've progressively taken away children's responsibility and their the expectation and the encouragement to develop independently. When we look at other cultures or our culture in a previous century, the kids had a lot of responsibility and they had a lot of trust in themselves because of that. When we kind of put children in a very safe environment and we kind of smother them or shelter them from things too much, then they're not able to develop that confidence in themselves. So we need to take an attitude that is not sheltering and smothering, but that trusts children and gives them opportunities to meet challenges that are within their reach and within their realm and that are progressively more challenging. So if you haven't given your child that opportunity when they become a teenager, they're not all of a sudden going to have self-esteem. If they haven't been able to rely and trust on themselves until that point, they're not all of a sudden going to develop it at that age. So you really need to develop from much earlier on. When they get to MPA or an institution like that, then we really encourage that by giving them tasks and responsibilities and opportunities to reach their limit and go a little bit beyond that by giving them a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of peer encouragement in that regard, and just the opportunity to grow and be independent in that way. Yes, I think self-esteem really comes from trust in yourself and the experience of meeting life's challenges. So as parents, you have to let your child meet life's challenges and not shelter them too much. Provide safe, try to make sure that their environment is safe and healthy and that the challenges that they're going to meet are within a realm that you're comfortable with, but definitely they need challenge in their life and they need the experience of meeting those challenges head on and being victorious.
Thank you. I think that covered a lot of ground and was a really wonderful kind of lens on self-esteem. So thank you for sharing that.
I'll add another one. Thinking of females, a nice practice that you can do, I feel like it's related to self-esteem is, and I do it every morning, is just you wake up and you touch every part of your body and you thank your body for being with you and for working properly and for being with you. And I think that's a nice way to start the day, and it's connecting to yourself, connecting to your body, and just orienting yourself to who you are as a person and what your relationship is in the world. So again, that's where a lot of confidence comes from too, is that you know who you are and you know your relationship to God and Guru and to life. So if you can start off each day with that relationship with your own self, with your own soul, with your own body, then you're starting off on the right foot in connecting with others. And so really, if you want kids and teenagers not to go, peer pressure is an interesting thing because it has a negative connotation, but a lot of times peers are really important, especially in the teenagers' development. Peers are super important for them, and there's a reason for that. They can correct each other better than parents can at that age. They can put each other in line. They can encourage them to take steps beyond what they're comfortable with, and that all comes from peers too. So peer pressure is not 100% a bad or good thing. It is a reality, and so there are ways that having peers are necessary, but there are ways that they really push a teenager forward. And then there's times where, someone can feel pressured to do things that they might not want to do because of peer pressure. And that really comes back to having that relationship with yourself. And so that needs to be there from day one. And that's given by the mother primarily in the first 3 years of life. And so it has its roots there. What you can do to help a teenager is that if you have an open relationship with them, if they have an adult, doesn't have to be their parent, but if they have an adult that is caring in their life, that they can go to them for advice and for guidance. So a teenager might take a step that is kind of down the road of something they didn't want to do because of peer pressure. And that's okay, that's going to happen. If they have caring adults in their life, then they can go talk to them about it afterwards and say, look, this is what happened. I ended up doing this. It didn't feel very good. And then that adult can kind of reflect that back to them and give them suggestions on how to do it differently in the future. So there are, that's a learning process that teenagers have to go through. They are going to have times where they follow the crowd because it's easier or because it feels better in the moment. And if they have reflection in their life and they have that space and those adults that can give them that feedback, then they can correct and they can try something different next time. And over time, they can learn how to stay true to themselves, no matter what the circumstance. And this comes back down to, again, that trust in yourself, which at Miri Piri Academy, we develop in a myriad of ways, from the martial arts and kabaddi, meditation. So meditation connects you to yourself when you're quiet within yourself and you're developing that relationship internally. Something like kabaddi, which is Indian wrestling, gives them a sense of trust in their body and their bodies interacting with the ground, with the dirt, with the other teenagers. And so all these different practices develop a sense of self and a real groundedness in self. And once you're grounded in yourself, then you're going to make better decisions, and you're going to trust yourself more in interactions with others.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. It definitely resonates with my own life experience, and it's really nice to hear kind of all the different pieces that kind of create a balance. And so is there anything else that you wanted to add on the topic of self-esteem before we move on?
I think that's good.
Okay, nice. Okay, well, so our next question is sort of related, but a bit of a different theme. And so I think that grappling with the ego, or home, is a theme that often emerges kind of in these years, as during these formative years. And so the question is, how can teens find balance between their ego and their own divinity during this phase of life?
So this question kind of points to why we have spiritual paths, because this is one of the goals of being on a spiritual path, is to find this balance between your ego, which is your sense of self and individuation, and your divinity and the infinity and the unknown. So when it comes to ego and dealing with it once you're a teenager, I mean, it's just important to recognize that you're going to be dealing with your ego your whole life. It's an almost constant battle. And a lot of the practices that we have on this path are there to confront the ego on a daily basis. So going to the guru and bowing, having a cold shower in the morning, waking up earlier than you want to do. These are all opportunities to challenge your ego and to be victorious and to have your soul triumph over your ego. So a lot of, again, the practices and the way that the program is set up at MPA is to create those opportunities, and they can come in those forms that I just told you about. It could be living with a roommate that you're not getting along with. It can be some policy that you disagree with. It's great. It's fantastic, because it's giving you the opportunity to really confront yourself in that way. If you don't have that ability to confront, if your ego is never running up against anything, then it can kind of start to flourish in its own realm without being challenged. So we definitely like to challenge the ego so that you can confront it and move through it.
Thank you. I think that's that covers a lot of ground, and very profound, and it definitely connects as well for my own experience at Miri Piri Academy and growing up and everything. So thank you for sharing all of that. And so is there anything else kind of on this topic of the ego that you'd like to share before we kind of move on to the next area?
I think that's good for now.
Okay, wonderful. So we're kind of switching gears a bit here, and kind of, asking about how can teens get involved with pressing social and environmental issues in today's world from a dharmic perspective? How can teens channel their hunger for change in a conscious way?
The starting point here, and what we talk to the kids about at MPA, is first take care of yourself. So before you go out and want to solve that problem over there, first make sure that your life is in order, that you have a good diet, that you're sleeping, that you're healthy, happy, holy. Once you're in that state of being, then what naturally arises as a desire in you for serving, then you can follow that. And that might be different than what the prevailing thoughts are at the time. So right now you're bringing up environmental things, and these are, obviously hot topics. And we can think that that's the most important thing, but for the teenager, for a child, it might be something totally different. So the starting point is to first make sure that you're taking care of yourself, so that the actions that you're taking are going to be healthy and are going to serve the situation, and are not just a way for you to displace your anger or, something that's unresolved in you to try to fix it on the outside. So first look at yourself, first take care of yourself. And then from that state of being, what naturally arises as a desire in you for service, then you can follow that. And it might look very different than what has been outlined here. So for instance, one of the students I was talking to a couple of days ago has a cat has come to their house, and it's all scratched up, and it needs some love and attention and some medical services. And so she is serving the cat in that way and getting her the help that she needs. So that is a naturally arising thing that came from her environment that she wants to serve. So I think for when you're helping young people, that you really need to listen to them and what's coming from their desires, and not from your own mind, and not from like the prevailing thoughts and the culture at the moment, because what they might think is important could look very different. And I think what we should encourage people to do is really look in their own environment for where they can serve and where they can help, and start there. Because I think, again, a lot of times our mind thinks like, this is the important thing over here, and that topic's the hot topic, and we need to focus on there. We're really like, we don't know what is really going to change the world, or is really going to serve. And so serving in your own environment, serving people in your environment, serving the pets, the animals, the issues that are in your own environment is a good place to start. I feel like I wasn't super clear on it, but let's see here. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think that's actually a very good starting place, and for all of us, really, for
yeah.
I think that's a good kind of perspective.
I think we have a bias in our thinking culture to go really global, first of all. And that's sometimes where some of these problems have begun. So I would just, really encourage people to stay where they are, look at their own environment, their own communities, and look at ways that they can help there and reach out there. And again, like young people, they are the leading edge, they are feeling the next thing. And so as adults, we can't insert what we think the most important things are, because it might be what they're feeling and what they're wanting to change and address could be something that we're not thinking about, or the approach could be so different than what we're thinking, that it's important to let the inspiration come from within themselves. Like if you go back in history during the Vietnam War, a couple years before that started, I don't think any of the adults had an idea that this was how the young people were going to express themselves. And so it does like emerge from within the young people, and it needs to be guided by them.
Absolutely. I think that that's crucial in order for people to kind of stay committed to making whatever changes in their own lives or in the world that they want to see.
Yeah, and we don't know what, we think we know what causes each effect, but we don't know. It could be that taking care of a cat has this ripple effect that is enormous, that we can't see with our own eyes. So it's important to really, let it unfold. And yes, humans were so limited in what we understand about the world. I mean, I was reading a little while ago that, it's the dust from the Sahara that goes into the Pacific Ocean and feeds the algae. And it's like, how would we have known that? I mean, and it takes science a really long time to figure these things out. And the world is so complicated, it's so intricate, it's so delicately balanced that trying to impose things kind of top down is not really the right approach. So again, just if you have kids or teenagers, just letting them know about the world, letting them know what the problems are, like encouraging them to get out in their community and serve. And I think that's the best approach to this.
Yeah, yes, I think absolutely. I mean, making it local, I mean, I think going local is actually a really good place to start, to really see change manifest. And I really like how you brought in kind of that whole idea that, of the interconnectedness of things and how we can't see everything with our human mind. There's a lot that's going on, so kind of beneath the surface of things. And so, yes, thank you for sharing all of that. And so, next question was, the phase of adolescence can sometimes bring turbulence, impulsiveness, and at times risk-taking behavior. How can wisdom from Sikhi and yogic practices bring steadiness to teens during this phase of life?
Okay, so their risk-taking behavior and is prevalent at this phase in life up until the frontal lobe gets developed for men about 25, for women about 18. It is when the frontal lobe is not developed, there is going to be more impulsive behavior. So first of all, let's start with the recognition that that's natural and that's to be expected, and it's not something that is going to go away entirely. So, and there's positive benefits to that in that kind of risk-taking behavior that you see in young people. They really are willing, and because of that frontal lobe not being developed, because they haven't had as much experience that teaches them to shut down and to kind of pull back, they really do go for life in a more, free way a lot of the times. And so that has a lot of benefits when it comes to innovation, creativity, learning what their limits are. Really, they're trying to figure out who they are, and they need to run up against their limits in order to find that. So there's a real benefit to that behavior, and it's not, the approach shouldn't be to try to squash it or to try to eliminate it. It's just not going to happen. Plus, there's a benefit to this behavior. So again, you need to provide teenagers and children the opportunity to test their limits and to engage in behavior that is challenging, that is a little beyond their reach, because they need that. They need that to feel alive and to feel themselves. And so providing the environments, providing the opportunities that they can do that is really healthy, like sports, mountain biking, things that teenagers love to do. You need to give them that opportunity to do that so that they can develop. It's part of their development. At the same time, if you do have a Dharmic lifestyle and they are learning how to meditate, then they are going to be working on their frontal lobe, and they are going to be developing the ability to be more neutral through life's turbulence. At this stage too, their hormones are all over the place and are really extreme. So that's just, again, to be expected, and you can help that out by having a healthy lifestyle, by having healthy diet, by having adults in their life that can hold a space for them that's bigger than themselves so that they can feel contained. That's really the approach that needs to be taken, is that they need that environment that allows them to challenge themselves, that allows them to grow, but is bigger than them, so that they can be reflected back properly. And there's people that they can go to for guidance and for limits. And at MPA, we recognize that teenagers like challenge, and that they need it. And so we build that into the program. And for example, for 40 days, we get up at 1:30, 1:45 and go to the Golden Temple and wash the floors. And that kind of extreme situation is they need that, and they love it, and they feel uplifted and invigorated from that. If you don't have those kinds of opportunities, then they might just go off for a risky behavior that is way more dangerous. So they need that. This isn't risky, it's intense. They need that intensity and they need that challenge in their life.
Yeah, thank you. That definitely resonates for me, and I appreciate that uniqueness of that kind of take on things. I think that was really wonderful. Yeah, so thank you for sharing all of that. Is there anything else you wanted to share about that before we kind of continue forward?
I would say the turbulence in teenagers' lives and the hormones being all over the place, definitely when you're interacting with a teen, don't negate that. That is their experience. Everything, it holds a lot of importance, is a very big deal for them. And so recognizing that and approaching them from that perspective, that in their life and at this time, it is a big deal. And respecting that is a good place to start, but also, letting them know that everything changes and this too will pass, and to try to help them ride out those waves of emotion.